guys, welcome to my legal classes. This is Ganesh Pujari, and in the series of Law of Torts, we are focusing on general defenses against tortious liability, and in that series, this is my fifth video. Here we are going to understand the fourth general defense, that is act of God. Remember, in my last video we have discussed inevitable accident, and we need to understand inevitable accident and act of God together because there are slight differences available, and sometimes you may get confused that they are same, but they are not. I have told few points in my last video, and here also I will emphasize where exactly there is difference between inevitable accident and act of God. How are we going to approach this video? First two slides are repetitive. We will see the first slide, that is the list of general defense which we have discussed in video number 1, and on act of God in the first video I have shown a slide which I am going to quickly show it here also, and both these two slides will take maximum 40 to 50 seconds, and after that we will understand everything related to act of God with three very important case laws. Not taking much of your time, let's get into the first slide. So first thing first, what are the different general defenses against tortious liability? The defender has all his defenses available with him. They are voluntary non-fit injuria, plaintiff the wrongdoer, inevitable accident, act of God, private defense, mistake, necessity, statutory authority, act of the state, parents having parental or quasi-parental authority, and acts causing slight harm. In video number 2, 3 and 4, we have already understood in detail with several case laws on voluntary non-fit injuria, plaintiff the wrongdoer, and inevitable accident, and here we are approaching act of God. This slide we have seen while discussing video number 1, where we have seen all the defenses together, and there I have told act of God is something extraordinary, something unprecedented, something unexpected, and having some natural force behind it. Only then we are calling it as act of God. But to understand this in detail, we need to go to next slide where I will explain everything related to act of God, and then we'll get into three very important case laws. Let's move to the next slide. Let us try and understand what is act of God here. First thing first, we need to know act of God is also known as vis major or force majeure. Now, to understand act of God, we need to take the help of third edition on negligence by Charles Worth, where he very clearly says to be an act of God, an occurrence must be consist these three essentials. What are they? A. Due to natural causes exclusively. B. Of an extraordinary nature. And C. Such that it could not be anticipated or provided against. Now the first one is, this is should be of something related to natural cause. Second one, it should be extraordinary, and third one, it couldn't be anticipated by the human being. Now only when we have the combination of all these three things, then we are calling it as act of God. Now the next question is, why are we considering act of God as a defense? Guys, remember, act of God are those incidents which are happening via natural forces. Now, there are few natural forces incidents which we can predict, which we can control also. But when such natural forces attack in such a way where there was no anticipation, where there was no control mechanism available, which we couldn't foresee or over and above human prudence. Now, when they happen, when nature hits hard, we are calling them as calamities. When such incidents are happened, when no one could anticipate them, now we cannot put obligation on anybody. That's why defendant also gets an exclusion. That is why we are considering act of God as a defense. So in a nutshell, we need to understand that the act of God are beyond human imagination, as well as they cannot be prevented by human intervention. Now, act of God is not just a general defense. Under strict liability also, it is an exception. Please remember that also. Under strict liability principle, when we are discussing R.R.N and Fletcher case and the entire principle over a period of time, we will have a detailed discussion on that. And when we are having that discussion also, you need to remember, under R.R.N and Fletcher case, it was very clearly discussed that act of God is an exception to strict liability. So this is not just general exception, this is a special exception also. What are the few examples for act of God? You can think of exceptionally heavy rain, volcano eruptions, earthquakes, droughts, floods, storms, heavy tides. All of these can be examples for act of God. Finally, the yellow box in the slide, there I have just mentioned what is the major difference between act of God versus inevitable accident. Remember, in act of God, there is natural forces available, and in inevitable accident, the same is missing. That is the biggest difference that you need to always remember. Under inevitable accident, there is no natural forces available, whereas in act of God, there is some extraordinary natural causes available and they couldn't be anticipated, which is what we need to remember. With that, I am moving to three important case laws to discuss on these three essentials, that is due to natural causes exclusively, of an extraordinary nature, and such that it could not be anticipated or provided against. Let's understand each of these essentials one by one with the help of case laws. The first very important essential of act of God is those things which happen due to natural causes exclusively. We cannot consider those things which are happened because of human intervention, etc. Only those which happen due to natural causes we can consider under the defense of act of God. For which we are going to understand the very important case law, that is Ramalinga Nadar versus Narayana Reddyar. Here what happened? Plaintiff bought 18 bags of green gram and he went to the defendant and asked for his transportation support. Now all that defendant had to do was transfer these 18 bags of green gram to the plaintiff's location. While defendant was transporting them in his vehicle, there was a jata happening, strike happening in a particular place, and these people or a big mob robbed everything from that particular truck. Now plaintiff asked for the damages from the defendant because he has given the assignment to the defendant to shift 18 bags of green gram from a particular location to his location, and defendant failed to do so. When this came in front of the court, defendant told, this is over and above my visibility and whatever happened is act of God. But the court denied the same by saying or referring Cookburn's statement in Nugent versus Smith, saying that whichever incident to consider under the act of God, there needs to be something which happened due to natural forces, whereas in this case it is not same. Here whatever happened was happened due to some human intervention and there was nothing like natural causes, so this will not come under the defense of act of God is what said. Now I have given a very detailed notes on this particular case law, the last para. Please read it completely so that you get additional knowledge on the same. With that, I am moving to the second case law. Now the first essential is very clear. When an events happen due to natural forces, they can be considered under the general defense. But can every single event happen due to natural force will be considered as defense? And the answer is no, because every year we have rain, we have winter, sometimes we have drought, sometimes we hear about earthquake. All of these cannot be defense available under tort law, because every single thing if we start considering as an exception or defense, then it becomes very difficult to manage. So the second essential, we need to read the first along with the second and third, and the second essential says they need to be extraordinary nature, right? Not every small thing will be considered as defense. Only when they are extraordinary, they couldn't be anticipated, they were too big, only in such cases it will be considered as an exception. Of course, I told anticipation there, which we are going to discuss in the third essential, but here all that you need to understand is they need to be something very big or extraordinary. That is what we are going to understand from Nicholas versus Marsland case law. What happened here? Marsland is a lady who had certain amount of land and she diverted a natural stream and made lot of lakes in her land. They were well built and there were no problems until 1 year where they got heavy rain. It was so heavy that nobody at that period of time have heard about such amount of rain happening. So what happened? Because of these heavy rains, all the lakes which were created by marshland got flooded and they started outflowing and finally breaking the bridges of Nicholas, who is the plaintiff. Now plaintiff asked for the compensation. Here, while giving the judgment, Justice Cockburn, referring Nugent versus Smith case, said that if there was negligence from the defendant side, he should have paid. There was no negligence, and if these natural forces could have been anticipated, then the defendant was liable. But these things were never anticipated. They were so big that nobody have heard in their lifetime. So they should be considered as act of God, and there is no question of paying any compensation. Here again, the Rylance versus Fletcher case law was discussed and held that even in strict liability, where somebody has created something unnatural, which is a danger, which has escaped, and the plaintiff has experienced the damage also, even then there is no question of compensation, because this is one of the exception available under strict liability also. This means act of God is an exception under strict liability also, which was very clearly told in Rylance versus Fletcher case law. I hope that is very clear. With that, I am taking you to the third essential. So the first two are very easy and clear. The first one is they happen due to natural forces, and the second one is they need to be of extraordinary nature. What is the last one? The last one is there is no chance to anticipate. Only when we have combination of these three, we are considering them as act of God. The events happen due to natural forces which are of extraordinary nature, and there was no possibility to see or anticipate or foresee, or human prudence had ability to see them. Only then we are considering them as the act of God. If there is any opportunity to foresee them, then they will not go under act of God, because there is always opportunity for precautions were available. Only when there is no opportunity for taking precautions is available, then we will consider them as act of God. The beautiful case law that we are having to understand this particular concept is Kalulal versus Hemchand. Now here under parties I have mentioned original plaintiff is Hemchand and defendant is Kalulal, because the citation that we are seeing is of appeal case. So it basically started with Hemchand versus Kalulal. What happened here in this case? There was a wall which fell down because of rain, and because that wall fell down, a child died under the wall. So Hemchand is the parent of that particular child, and he asked the compensation with Kalulal because that wall was belonging to Kalulal. In the court, Kalulal tried to say that there was heavy rain, because of the rain the wall fell down, and hence it needs to be considered under act of God, and there lies no question of compensation or whatsoever. But the court said that the rain was only of 2.66 inches, and such rain is well anticipated, it was common, and the wall fell because of the negligence of the defendant. There were already cracks available in the wall and he didn't repair, and finally it fell down, and hence this cannot be considered as an act of God, and Kalulal has to pay compensation to the plaintiff, that is Hemchand, which is what held in this particular case law. Again, I have taken the reference of Tennant versus Earl of Glasgow case law, where Lord Westbury very clearly told that act of God is circumstances which no human foresight can provide against, and of which human prudence is not bound to recognize the possibility. So there is no anticipation available, which is what one of the very important essential. So we need to read all of these three together, that is natural forces and of extraordinary nature, and finally they cannot be anticipated. Here in this case law I have also mentioned what Justice Bud J has to say. Please read through his comment also, and with that I am handing over this presentation to Nishan.
Nature has given lot of gifts to us. Rain is one among them. I enjoy the rain. Did you guys enjoy the rain? Please comment. With that, I'm concluding this session. Please subscribe our channel. Please like, share and comment our videos.